Howdy everybody, how y'all doing? Welcome to the Ice House, where we try to keep things cool, calm, collected, mostly a bit chill, right? Well, I don't know how many of you out there have had the, let's just say, privilege of driving in big city, traffic and highways, and whether it's in rush hour or just some good old congestion, it kind of seems like no matter what, there's always a pack that wants to go, say, 15 to 20 miles faster than everybody else, right? And it can be a little bit frustrating if you're not used to that city or their driving habits and patterns, right? Because, every city has their own sort of rhythm and pacing. Yeah. I mean, I used to drive around the country for a bit, right? Or at least ride in the car, because, my feet can't hit the pedals unless I kind of do something like Short Round from Indiana Jones. But we don't need to go into that whole rigmarole and setup. Point is, we all know it's a little bit frustrating, and we all know that everybody kind of goes through life at their own pace, per se, right? And because you've always seen those Sunday drivers, if you will, and maybe it's not even on a Sunday, and maybe you're driving through town and they're driving, say, 10 miles under the speed limit, and you're like, "Get out of the road, Grandpa!" And it's some 26-year-old kid who's just kind of lollygagging around and maybe on their phone. But that's a different issue entirely. But the point is, we all kind of have sort of different paces and perspectives, right? It kind of got me thinking about that movie. It was kind of in the sweet spot of the after 2000s, before 2012-ish, right, era, about speed, wanting to go fast, and that's right, I'm talking about Talladega Nights, right? Because there's that one scene where Ricky Bobby's dad is talking to the class and says, if you're not first, you're last. And because Ricky Bobby was, wanted to make his dad happy and wanted his dad to be around, and because his dad was absentee, and took those gems of wisdom maybe a little bit too far in the absurd direction, because it's supposed to be a comedy, right? And absurd, like it was. And it wasn't until, and that's kind of what developed Ricky Bobby to race and, be driven forward and always be first and always, push himself. And it wasn't until Ricky Bobby was an adult that his dad was like, you could be second, third, or fourth, or fifth. I mean, you guys know how it goes. Like I said, it's not quite a classic, but I think it's a fun one from a different era, right? I mean, that's for true, and it might not be exactly kid friendly, but I wasn't a kid when I watched it, and we'll just leave it at that. So the thing about that really got me thinking in all this pace of life, and is a question of, and you might kind of figure out where I fall on this whole, I wouldn't say either or, it might be more of a linear path or a spectrum, if you will, even though using that word kind of feels like a dirty word nowadays, and it shouldn't, but kind of does. But there's on one hand, you've got the people who want to go fast, they want to do the speed run through life, right? They want to do it quickly and maybe efficiently, but sometimes they just want to get in, get out, and get it over with so they can move on to the next thing, right? Not necessarily process it. Maybe they've got good instinctual reaction time, right? Or, when it's the kids who take the test and they're done 30 minutes before everybody else, and you wonder if they're that smart or if they just don't like tests, right? I mean, it is what it is. But on the other side, way over here, you have the people that, well, I would say more kind of in the middle, you have the people that, they want to take their time. They want to, study what it is. They want to make sure they're prepared for it, like it's a test. They actually do spend more time studying and trying to retain the knowledge so that if it gets presented in a different way than it was presented in class, they can, figure out the answer, sort of deal. Or maybe it's an obstacle course where, there's the people who run first and want to be first and figure out the challenges and don't want to watch everybody and figure it out for themselves. probably make silly mistakes that they'd taken a second to think about might not have put themselves in this situation. But then you've got the people who kind of sit and study and watch, and then watch other people go through the obstacle course and kind of see, well, I don't want to put myself in that situation, so I'm going to take a different route and see what happens, and so they can be thoughtful and satisfied with how they chose to go through the course instead of instinctually or just reactionary, right? The same like with the driving analogy. They're the ones who kind of they ride with the pack, not the fastest pack, not the slowest pack, but they're kind of sitting, observing. They're the ones that probably could have told you what's on the defensive driving test and course before you took it, because it's kind of how they learned and how they operate, sort of thing. And then you have the other people down the line, like I said, the ones that just go slow. They're not really interested in being the first, and they might be interested in being efficient, but they're not in it for the speed run. They're just out to kind of, if they have to get through it, they're gonna get through it on their own pace, right? So like I said, I it's probably no surprise. I'm somewhere in the middle here, where I want to do something, I want to do it well, but I also don't want to be the first to usually run off and do something, or I kind of want to take my time to be a little bit more calculated, thoughtful, and kind of see how things go, right? I mean, like I said, that's no surprise. I'm kind of curious where you guys fall under things, and the other truth is, on this sort of kind of spectrum, if you will, is the fact that it can apply differently to different situations, right? I mean, if it's your favorite comic book, or, well, back in the day when we used to wait in lines, for midnight releases of games, right? You want to be first in line for that game you've been waiting for and so excited about, and I get that, right? But if it's something you don't want to do, you're kind of here on the slower end, because if you have to get there, you don't want to get there any quicker. So, like I said, I get that there's sort of a situational sort of grounds that applies to, but in a lot of ways, I think you know what I mean, that there's some people that just seems like they're go-getters, they're driven, they're always off doing something, they can't sit still, they're twitchy, and they're not tweaking, they're not like, they're maybe they have a little too much sugar, but they're just, like, sometimes it feels exhausting to keep up with them, unless you're that kind of driven competitive spirit, and then that just kind of pushes you forward and helps you, well, develop your own skills, which is really cool when you find somebody to match your own speed and match your own pace. And yeah, you kind of, the whole iron sharpens iron, if you will. That's like I said, it's really neat when you find that in a friend or somebody close, right? Or somebody you get to know over the years that you can become a lifetime friend with, right? A lifelong friend with. Yeah. And if you've ever found any of those, definitely hold on to them, because even if you don't agree on politics or some of these, seemingly important things right now that divide up friendships and divide up families, right? Remember that these people are irreplaceable. So hopefully you can figure out how to work through differences, because I mean, there's enough to divide us all, right? But that's not really what I'm trying to get at, but I think that's really important to note. But I digress, right? So, there's also, like I said, there's the driven people who sometimes need a little help with direction because they're just kind of get caught up in their momentum. And then you have the people who are thoughtful, who are calculated. They kind of sit in the room thinking a little bit too much sometimes and never get off their butt to do something, because it's kind of like the well, terrible movie, but Along Came Polly, where he's a risk assessor, and he doesn't do anything, and he's too afraid, and he has to sit there and count the beans all the time. right? We can't get so stuck in our head that we don't go anywhere, and we kind of have a good idea of how things would go, but until you actually get your forward momentum and do something, you're probably not gonna figure it out or go anywhere, right? Which is why it's good to have people with that drive around you to help motivate you once in a while. And then you've got, like I said, the people that just don't want to do it, aren't motivated, or either apathetic or nonchalant about the situation. That I mean, sometimes let's face it, sometimes if it's not a situation you have to be in, right, and a situation you don't want to be in, sometimes if you don't care, if you don't want it, if you're not driven for it at all, you know, maybe it's time to think about what you are driven for, or what you do want to process, or you do want to do well. Because if you're not really where you feel like it matters, you know, maybe it's a thought that there's something that actually might matter more and make you feel a little bit more like a person, right? So there's definitely that sort of thing. But in the same way that you kind of need that creative mind and the business mind, if you're going to try and do anything in the world and do something innovative and try to make a profit, right? You need people to work together with different skill sets and different drives. So, I mean, that's mostly what I had to say, but I'm just curious kind of how you guys look at the world. If you're one of those speed run people, if you're one of those more calculated people, or if you felt like you've been on a log for so long and kind of feel like you're floating and going nowhere and treading water, that, you know, maybe it's time to think about, hey, well, what do I like doing? What do I want to do? What actually drives me to go forward? Because, you know, I've heard it said, and I've said it myself, and I believe it, that forward motion and chasing after something and doing something, even if it doesn't work out the way you want it to, and even if it's a learning experience, and even if it may end up not being the thing that you really wanted to chase after, once you figure out what it is, it helps you figure out what you really want and what you want to chase after. But if you're sitting still so long, it's easy to think and dream and tell yourself why it's not going to work out. But then you look at those guys that, well, they're just really willing to jump headfirst in anything, and, you know, with their momentum and their try again attitudes, that they figure out how to make something work, right? And they keep moving. So, I mean, that maybe not be, well, my lifestyle or my take, but once again, it's good to surround yourself with motivated and thoughtful people, and people that will give you good advice, so that, you know, when you need help or you're trying to figure out how to move forward, that you have enough of a team and a crew and a group that, well, you together you can plan and sort something out that might have a actually pretty good success rate, right? So, like I said, that's all I got today, and it's kind of what I've been pondering about. So, I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you want to like, subscribe, or share your comments below, or, you know, let people know that there's a pondering penguin out here that, well, maybe they could be part of the conversation too, because I appreciate this conversation. So, like I said, that's all I got. So, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and keep on moving forward. So, until next time, we'll see you later. Bye!